Did you know that people are more likely to buy jam if they're presented at the supermarket with 6 jams to choose from than if they're presented with over 20? It's our ability to be mesmerized and paralyzed by choice. It's true, and it's only getting worse. Not only that we have more and more jams to choose from each time we go to the supermarket, but as a society as a whole, making commitments is more and more difficult. Our range of choices ever increases and increases, grows and grows. And it should be difficult for us to make choices in that kind of place, because as any rational actor, we want to have the opportunity to assess all of the potential before we plump for one or for the other, the one that seems both the best fit and the best value. That's only the sensible course of action. We want to maximize what we get, and as long as there's always something else to look at, how can we be sure before we've checked it? It's only common sense, and in fact, dependent upon how important the decision you're making is, we should be ever more careful before we commit. Jam, that might be a 10-minute issue. The person you spend your life with, that could take you longer than a whole lifetime to decide. Add to that a sometimes more than healthy skepticism of convention and historic practices, and of the opinions of our friends and families and communities. We, like no other generation before us, have categorized and catalogued the failings of our ancestors. And, as you know, they are legion. And if indeed they were wrong in so many ways, then why trust any of the wisdom or the tradition that they pass down to us? And in addition to those things, the cult of the individual, strongly in the ascendancy. I matter. I'm in control of myself. I make my own decisions. What is primarily of importance is me. Well, mix these societal trays with your electronic blender, bake it for a few years, slather the top with jam, and you have a recipe for inaction and non-commitment. And as anecdotal proof for my conjecture, I offer you the phrase that I hear most often chatting to strangers in the pub. I'm spiritual, but not religious. Those of you with active Tinder profiles will know too that this is the most important thing to write in your biog, along with a picture of a child who's not yours and a very cute dog. I'm spiritual, but not religious. That is to say, I have a spiritual life, but without any accountability, any commitment or obligation, shared with nobody but myself. Well, that sure is a cute idea, but Jesus offers an alternative. Rather than just staring at the array of jams on offer, take one off the shelf and buy it. Participate in the Godhead and in intimate communion with your neighbours. But it's going to cost you, and it's going to cost more than the £1.49 for the strawberry preserve. It means nailing your flag to the mast. It means visibly marking yourself out as other than the prevailing society. At a time when consumption of blood was sinful and lawless, it meant standing up as a follower of the man who says, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Now, we might not have to defend our celebration and consumption of the Eucharist as the early Christians did, but we face an equally foundational challenge, that is to defend our commitment to religion at all. There's an Australian producer of films, a director. He's called Bruce Beresford. You might know him for Driving Miss Daisy. That was probably his most popular and well-known production. But one of the most difficult and quite moving films that he ever created was one called Black Robe. It's a story about French Jesuit missionaries. They're working among the Native American people of Quebec. Now, one of the great challenges of that movie was the bitterly cold winter and the weather that goes along with filming in Saint-Jean, where the movie was made. It created some fairly major logistical and practical difficulties with the camera equipment and the actors. But for all of the difficulty of that, it wasn't the hardest thing about the movie. Neither was it the accuracy of the historical portrayal. In fact, in making Father Laforgue's missionary obsession believable to filmgoers today, Beresford had this to say. He said, he had, that is Father Laforgue, an obsession with getting people into heaven. This is a concept few people these days take seriously. My biggest challenge was to convince an audience that this is important. Well, the question that we might hear today is, what's in it for me? And this passage offers us 6 compelling answers. Jesus was not without the knowledge that it was much more difficult to preach to people who didn't see something in it for themselves. This is indeed why at the very beginning of this chapter, before he starts telling them anything at all about the bread of life, the first thing he does is make sure they've all got full stomachs. And he offers these in our passage today. What's in it for me? Well, to have life eternal, to be raised on the last day, to abide in Jesus, and to have Jesus abide in me, to live because of Jesus and for his sake, and finally, to live forever. Rich rewards, sure, but you still have to be willing to take that remarkable first step of faith into the unknown. We at least have the benefit of having seen all those who have gone before us on that same path. But it wasn't like that for the first disciples. C.S. Lewis puts it this way: I don't know and I can't imagine what the disciples understood our Lord to mean when, his body still unbroken and his blood unshed, he told them to eat of his flesh and drink his blood. Yet, I find no difficulty in believing that in the Eucharist, the veil between worlds, nowhere else so opaque to the intellect, is nowhere else so thin and permeable to divine operation. Here, a hand from the hidden country touches not only my soul, but my body. Here, the Don, the modern in me, have no privilege over the savage or the child. The command, after all, was take, eat, not take, understand. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating some unintellectual blind acceptance. You'll find, over by the door there, booklets on the Eucharist, and there are 3 clerics here today who'd be more than happy to talk to you further about the Eucharist. But what I am saying is that you have to make a choice, one that calls for commitment. That when you eat this bread and drink this wine, when you eat the flesh and drink the blood, you choose to be part of something divine and something beyond our full comprehension. What I am saying is that you've got to pick your jam and eat it. Amen.